Welcome, everyone, to the New Year, New You Health, Wealth, and Prosperity Workshop. My name is Melissa Deely, and I'm really excited to take you on this journey today, tying in how to optimize your health, your wealth, and live in prosperity so that you can implement all of this for 2024. So, just to introduce myself a little bit, because I don't know all of you here, I am an integrative health practitioner. I am also a trainer of NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming, timeline therapy, and hypnotherapy. And I love having all of these tools in my toolbox to support people on their health, wealth, and prosperity journey. Sometimes I call myself the friendly toxin slayer because I work with people to help them detox their physical body, their mental, their emotional, and their spiritual bodies. And that's because when we have symptoms showing up in our physical body, they've already moved through the spiritual, the mental, and the emotional bodies. And so we start the healing process in the physical body, but we also have to make sure that we go and clear those toxins out of the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual body for lasting health. You know, all those stuffed down emotions, because society teaches us that we shouldn't express our emotions, and we need to feel our emotions. We need to feel them safely and appropriately, and we shouldn't be squashing them down. And what's happened is we have people today that are carrying around bags of rocks on their back filled with these emotions that are bogging us down, and over time that becomes toxic in the body. We also have mental toxicity, the voices we listen to in our head. What are they saying to us? I always say that 99% of what we hear inside our head is complete BS, and we shouldn't listen to it. I know when we're interacting with other people, we have two ears and one mouth, so we're encouraged to listen more and talk less. And yes, that's important. But when it comes to the conversations we have with ourselves in our head all day long, every single day, we want to talk more and listen less. Because who wants to listen to BS anyway? Right? It's tearing you down. It's telling you you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not beautiful enough. All BS. You are everything you need to be in order to achieve whatever it is that you are here on this earth to do. And so talk back to it. Say cancel, cancel, cancel. And reframe whatever that thought is that you've had in your head. And all of those limiting beliefs that we developed at such a young age, in that 0 to 6 age group that we carry through life, that's where I use timeline therapy to detox those limiting beliefs as well as those emotions in order to clear them so that you don't have dis-ease come back later in life. And then I actually refer out the spiritual detoxing to a colleague of mine who is also a reverend and trained in NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnotherapy. And we work together so that she can help detox the spiritual process, and then that is the complete series in which I work with people. Sometimes I also call myself the mystery solver. I'm solving the mysteries of why you feel the way you do. And I do that with functional medicine lab tests that get mailed to your home so that we can determine the imbalances in your body that are causing you to feel the way you do, and then support them. Bring the body back into balance so that it can heal itself. And that's what the body is designed to do. It's just that our modern life has us living in high stress, poor nutrition, poor sleep, and the body is too depleted. That high stress starts to burn through our minerals and our vitamins, and we're not getting enough through our food sources because of our nutrient deplete soil systems to replenish that, and we get depleted, and then we don't have the ability to come back into balance on our own. So once we know where we're depleted, we can bring the body back into balance so that it then can start the healing process. This is very powerful, what our body can innately do. We've just moved away from a place of living a life where it can naturally do it. So we need some support. And this is all natural support using plant-based medicines and herbs. And in addition to that, I work with coaches, helping them solve the mystery of why their client isn't able to move forward on the action steps that they're being asked to do. Some can, and some start and get stuck. Why is that? It's because of that patterning from that 0 to 6 age group, excuse me, that was developed so long ago. And the unconscious mind has these patterns deeply ingrained and we haven't upgraded them. You see, when we are born, we are like hardware of a computer. And what happens is we just have download, download, download for the first 6 years of our life so that we can learn to be a functioning member of our family, society, school system, etc., etc. And the unconscious mind is very smart. It will do what it knows works and keep doing that instead of trying to develop a new pattern for everything that we do in our life. If it finds a pattern that works, it keeps repeating it. And then we find ourselves in our 30s or our 40s stuck because that pattern of our inner 5-year-old no longer works. And we need to break through that and create a new pattern that will work for the person that we are becoming. And again, using NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnotherapy is very powerful in uncovering those patterns because they're unconscious, so they're outside our awareness. So you can't just sit and think about it. We have to dig deeper and tap into the unconscious mind in order to determine what the patterning is and then reprogram it, which we can do because of neuroplasticity in our brain. We can rewire the brain. So really cool stuff. You can tell I'm super excited about it. And so I love teaching this to other coaches to have greater impact, because me just working one-to-one with clients helps that client. But if I teach more coaches to be able to work with one-to-one clients, then there's greater impact in reaching more people with these powerful tools that have only really been around since the 1980s. So this is all based on new research into neuroscience, etc., and how the mind works and the unconscious mind. So I hope you're excited to dive into all of this here today. And I just want to ask, who's ready to feel amazing in your body? Wouldn't it be nice to wake up every day feeling amazing in your body and not dragging your ass, feeling sluggish? Another question, who's ready to hear the connection with your clients as you build rapport on a discovery call? Amazing, right? To have that deeper connection with a client, and when you build rapport, to have them want to follow your suggestions because they trust in you, they know they like you, and people who are like each other like each other. So when you build that rapport so that they recognize that they are like you, they automatically start to like you, and you can have better conversion on your discovery call. So we're going to dive into languaging that can really help the other person like you more quickly. And who is ready to see the aha in your client's face as a result of working with you? Isn't that what we as coaches love? Is that aha moment when the client gets it and they have that breakthrough. So that's what we are going to be talking about today. And first, I'm going to share my screen here with you all. And I've also, by the way, I'm recording this so that others who can't attend the actual workshop dates and times can have this information. And as such, I've pinned myself so that none of you will show up on the screen for the recording. And I just want you to know that. And let me share my screen with you, and we are going to dive in. So first of all, I want to teach you all the learning state. And this is something that you can use from now on for every single webinar you attend, any class you ever attend. You can teach this to your children to learn in school, because the unconscious mind is where we do our learning. It's not the conscious mind. Now, the school system doesn't know that, and they will often snap children who are naturally going into their learning state out of their learning state and go, "Hey, Johnny, pay attention." And Johnny was in his learning state, and the teacher just snapped him out because they don't know this. The learning state does look very much like daydreaming. And the way we get into our learning state, it's very easy. I want you to listen and then do this with me. So first off, you're not going to move your head. You only move your eyes. And you move your eyes slowly. You just literally tilt your eyes up as if you're looking through your eyebrows. And then you want to, in your imagination, expand out for as far as you can see around your body and open up your peripheral vision. And Imagine seeing all the way around behind you. And what this does is it gets us out of our narrow focus that we all get so stuck in because we're looking at screens all day long, and we're opening it up. And when we open up like this, guess what? Our senses can access so much more, and we can learn more easily as all of the information is coming in from around us. And what you might notice, so you can go ahead and do this now as I'm talking. Remember, don't move your head, just lift your eyes up, look out through your eyebrows, and then sense your vision opening up. And so what you might notice a sensation. It's not really a feeling. For me, when I get into my learning state, I actually feel a little bit fuzzy headed. It's not brain fog. It's not that I can't think. It's not that I can't deliver this workshop. Don't worry, I totally can. That's just the sensation I experience when I open up and allow all of the information to come in more easily. For other people, they might feel a calmness. They might feel an opening. So it's whatever sensation you notice that's right for you. And what we're doing here is we're also dropping into our parasympathetic nervous system. And so it's impossible to feel negative emotions or have negative thoughts when we're in this state. And because we're looking out for kids at school, it's very often they might put their head down on the desk and then look up at the teacher. And that's where the teacher might think they're daydreaming and not really paying full attention, but they're in their learning state and absorbing the information really well. So that's one takeaway from today that's incredibly powerful that you can start implementing everywhere in your life whenever you are learning something. And as I said, teach it to your children. I also want to just dive in a little bit and talk about the unconscious mind. This picture is not to scale. The conscious mind makes up only 10% of our mind, and the unconscious mind makes up 90% of our mind. Now, the conscious mind, as you know, is where we do our, conscious thinking, our problem solving, etc. And it's where we spend a lot of time in our daily life at work. It's logical thinking. Whereas the unconscious mind is where we have all of our memories stored. It's responsible for our emotions. And we obviously are not aware of what's going on in our unconscious mind because it's unconscious. And yet it's 90% of our mind. Now, we are taught at school the tools of our conscious mind, but we're not taught the tools of our unconscious mind. With our unconscious mind storing memories, it really impacts how we show up and how we live our life every single day. Remember earlier I talked about patterning, right? So it will store every single memory you've ever had in your life from every experience without judgment. It just stores them. And what it will also do is it will suppress memories of traumatic experiences. So that's why we never see soldiers in a war zone have PTSD in the war zone. It will only happen when they come home because the unconscious mind will suppress those memories until it deems that it is safe to bring them forth for the conscious mind to release. And so that's a self-protectionism. The unconscious mind is in charge of running our body, preserving the body, regardless of the lifestyle that we lead. So sometimes we're putting a lot of, responsibility on the unconscious mind if we're not leading a healthy lifestyle, because its responsibility is to keep us safe, preserve the body, preserve our health. And in between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind is something called the critical faculty. Now, this critical faculty develops around the ages of 7 or 8. That's when we start to develop logical thinking. And when we work with the tools of NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnotherapy, we are going around the critical faculty. In fact, with hypnotherapy, the critical faculty comes down entirely, and the two minds are working together. And timeline therapy is a form of hypnotherapy, so it has the same effect. And with NLP, the tools have us kind of go around the critical faculty and directly into the unconscious mind to rewire the brain with whatever patterning we want to implement. And that leads me to this slide, which is called the NLP communication model. And this is really powerful. And I know when I learned it, it blew my mind. So, as I said, every experience we've ever had is being stored by our unconscious mind in our memory. And the experience of that event is all coming to us through all of our senses, right? And then we actually get 12 million bits per second of information through our senses. That's a lot. That is a huge number. 12 million bits per second. Huge number, right? Yeah. And that's way too much for our brain to be able to cope with. So it distorts, deletes, and generalizes down to only 128 bits per second. That's a huge compression. And it distorts, deletes, and generalizes through our filters. Now, all human beings have the same filter categories, but the content inside those filters is as different as our fingerprints, because no two of us have ever had every single experience in our lives be the same. So those filters are how we interact with time, space, matter, energy, as well as our language, as well as our memories, our decisions, our meta programs. So whether you're an introvert, an extrovert, a judger, a perceiver, your values and beliefs, and your attitudes. So you can see how what's filed within those filters is very different from one individual to the next. And once the brain distorts through those filters, it creates what we call an internal representation. And that internal representation is basically the movie screen of your life, that image that you have. So if you all just close your eyes for a second, and I want you to go back, we've just come through the holiday season. I want you all to just go back to the last holiday you experienced and see yourself in the room where you slept. It might have been at a relative's house, it might have been at a hotel, it might have been at an Airbnb or a friend's house. And see yourself there. And I want you to see where the bed is positioned in the room. I want you to see where there might be a bedside table, a lamp, where there might be a desk, there might be an entrance to a washroom, there might be the window, there might be artwork on the walls. All of you can see that in your mind, right? Awesome. Yes, so that's the internal representation of that experience for you. Now, I want you to think about, how do you feel in your body as you remember that? Because it was the holidays, right? So I'm hoping it means you all are feeling maybe just a little bit happier as a result of bringing up that internal representation. And so you can see how, as we have our internal representation, it impacts our state. And that state can impact our physiology. There's a lot of research out there that shows that happy people live longer than people who aren't as happy in their lives, because how we feel is impacting our stress level, which is impacting our immune system. And obviously, the healthier the immune system, the longer we are able to live. How we feel also impacts our behavior. So if we're feeling low energy and blah, we're going to act really differently than if we wake up in the morning full of energy, we bounce out of bed, ready to start our day, and we put on our workout clothes and get into a workout. Completely different behaviors based on how we're feeling. And listening to how our body feels is really important, because it will guide us. So the tools of NLP help us move and rewire what's needed to be adjusted between our internal representation and our state. And the tools of hypnotherapy can help us change the behaviors of what it is that we're doing that isn't serving us, that we need to then change in order to support the person we are becoming. And so all of this is a very long-winded way of saying that you are creating your reality every single day, your own reality every single day, because your experience and how you interpret it and how you bring up that internal representation in your mind is so different to even the person standing next to you, because it's been deleted and distorted and generalized through the filters which are unique to you. But here's the great news. If you don't like your reality, we can change it for you. So I'm just going to share a little story quickly, and then we are going to dive into the toxic load quiz that I hope you all prepared before you came to this workshop, as you've been asked to do. So 3 little girls are walking in a park, and they see a snake slither across the path in front of them. And the first little girl goes, "Ah!" and runs away. The second little girl goes, "Oh, someone's going to step on you." And she kneels down and she picks up the snake and she cups it in her hands and she walks it over and puts it on the grass off the path so it won't get stepped on. And the third little girl looks at the snake and goes, and does nothing. So one experience, the snake slithers across their path. 3 very different responses. The first girl has learned to fear snakes, so she ran away. The second girl has learned that all creatures, no matter how big, small, slimy, or scaly, are to be cared for, so she picked up the snake and brought it to safety. And the third little girl hadn't yet experienced a snake, and therefore she didn't have any filters to help her determine how she should be behaving, or any patterns to determine how she should be behaving. However, now she's seen 2 very opposite experiences or responses, and as a result, next time she will use one of those responses, and it will depend on whichever one struck her emotionally in a bigger way. So you can imagine when those 3 girls go home that evening to their separate homes and they tell their parents about their day, the parents are going to think completely different events happened than the fact that it was just one event of a snake slithering across the path. And this is why in Canada, they actually no longer allow police testimonies, testimonials from eyewitnesses in court for motor vehicle accidents. So the police no longer allow this because they know that you can have 3 people see the same accident and come into court and tell 3 completely different stories. And so there's no more eyewitnesses in motor vehicle accident traffic court. So that's your introduction to the power of your unconscious mind, which is very important in how you show up every day and how you live your life. And remember, I said that the unconscious mind is in charge of running your health programs, preserving your body, keeping you safe, keeping you alive. So I had asked you to take my Discover Your Toxic Load quiz prior to joining this workshop. And what I love about that quiz is that it brings to your conscious awareness the symptoms that you've been experiencing in life that you might have been ignoring or discounting because society generally teaches us to. So often in society, we just accept that as we get older, we should feel more aches and pains. And that isn't actually true. But society has led us to believe that. And so if we have aches and pains, we ignore it thinking it's just aging and we don't do anything about it. However, aches and pains and any symptom that you experience is your body bringing it to your awareness and asking you to do something differently. So this quiz is helping to bring to awareness the symptoms that you have been experiencing that you probably haven't really thought about until you sat down to do this quiz. And so I just want to ask all of you to put into the chat whether your results were in the mild category, the moderate category, the severe category, or the extreme category. And it doesn't matter where you're at. It's again to bring this to your awareness, because wherever you're at, now you're in the right place to learn how to improve it and how to bring your toxic load score number down. And it's not your fault. We live in a toxic world. And if you haven't been taught about what toxicity is doing to our health, then you've been going through life, being the best person you can be, raising families, building your career, being a spouse, a partner, and you don't necessarily know this. But once you know it, you can't unknow it, and now you can start making different choices. So with 144,000 man-made chemicals introduced since World War II, our world is far more toxic than it ever used to be. And if you look at the sharp increase in chronic illness in the last 100 years compared to all the thousands of years of human existence before that, there's got to be a correlation between chronic illness and toxicity. And in fact, there is. There are two main causes of chronic illness: high toxic load and nutrient deficiency. And I mentioned earlier about our nutrient depleted soil systems. That is definitely causing nutrient deficiency, as is the processed food industry that is promoted all over television, everywhere you turn and look, promoted as convenient, and yet it is made of very nutrient weak foods. And therefore, people who are living on a processed food diet are not getting the nutrients they need. In fact, it only has 17 of the 90 nutrients that we need to be healthy and thrive on a daily basis. And chronic illness is a huge problem in the world today, with 6 in 10 Americans having one chronic illness diagnosis already, and 4 in 10 having more than one. Put your hand up if you know people who have chronic illness diagnoses. Look at that. Every single one of us knows somebody, right? So understanding your toxic load is really important, because if you can reduce your toxic load, you're reducing your risk of a diagnosis of chronic illness. And if you actually have a diagnosis of a chronic illness, you are going to be helping support the symptoms that go with that. And potentially by starting to detox, removing the toxins in your body, you're going to start feeling better. And maybe you can then start to change, any medications that you're on to help with the symptoms that you're suffering, because your symptoms start to go away simply because of a detox. So let's just talk about why our body isn't coping with these 144,000 chemicals. So first of all, the human body evolves very slowly, and these toxins have come upon us very quickly. And so the body hasn't had time to adapt well enough. And our liver is a very powerful, very important organ in our body, with over 500 chemical reactions that it does every single day in order to keep us alive and healthy. And its job is to keep our system pure and clean. And it actually cleanses our blood every 6 minutes. All the blood in our body is cleansed through the liver every 6 minutes. But because of all of these factors shown on this slide here, alcohol intake, excessive workload, smoking, prescription and over-the-counter medicines, infection or illness, so our immune system is fighting stuff, and our immune system is 70% of it is housed in our gut. Obviously, our liver is in our gut, so that impacts our liver's ability to function. Stress, whether it be psychological, emotional, processed foods, the sugar and the white flour products, the poor quality oils, etc. All of this, the liver has to filter and help cleanse our body. We also have environmental toxins, heavy metals, pesticides, allergies, and food intolerances. So every time we're eating food that we have a food intolerance to, and we might be completely unaware of that, it actually triggers inflammation in the body and puts more work on the liver to process it. And if that's something you're concerned about, the lab tests that I run, one of them is a food sensitivity lab test that you can do at home to determine what foods your body is struggling with, so we can remove them temporarily to allow the body to heal, bring the stress level down on the digestive system, the liver, and then reintroduce one by one, so that you can have an understanding of how often you can eat that food without symptoms, and then cut back on how often you're eating it. Because sometimes we don't know that we have an intolerance and we're eating that food much more often than we should be. And once we know, we can make a different choice. Poor nutrition and poor eating habits, eating on the run, shoveling food in, again, put strain on the digestive system and the liver. And we are a coffee and energy drink addicted society, which the liver also has to be processing. So all of these factors are putting a burden on our liver and its ability to detox. Our nutrient deficient soils are also a massive problem. Ever since the agricultural revolution, when it was take from the soil, we haven't been putting back into the soil. So the soils no longer have the nutrients. Therefore, they're not grown into the food. Therefore, you're not getting them in your body. And this is a huge problem, because the liver actually detoxes in 2 phases. And the second phase of detox requires very specific nutrients that are no longer in our soil system. And that second phase of detoxing is where the toxins are turned to being water soluble so that we can excrete them through our sweat, our breath, our urine, and our bowels. And when that phase can't happen because we don't have the nutrients to allow for it to happen, the liver gets very smart. And what it will do is it will store those toxins in our fat closets to protect them from our bloodstream. And our fat closets are our brain, which is largely made up of fat and water. In women, our breasts, we have a lot of fatty tissue in our breasts. And then anywhere else we're carrying excess weight. And I don't know about you, but I don't want toxins in my brain and I don't want toxins in my breasts. Look at how much neurodegenerative disease we have in the world today. And then look at how much breast cancer we have in the world today. There is a correlation here. And so detoxing is absolutely critical. And so if you would like to know more about detoxing, please book a call with me so that we can chat about my detox programs and which one is going to be right for your lifestyle and get you started on this process. I'm actually currently completing my first detox of 2024 this week. I do a 7-day detox every quarter, and I have a shake powder that I drink with all the nutrients that my body needs to thrive and the detox formula in it, so I'm never left hungry, and that allows my body to clean out all the cells, dead cells, the toxins, etc., etc. So I can share with you more information about that. And I highly recommend that you do that, because if you are a business owner, or even if you have a career, if you're parents, you can't raise your children, you can't build your business or build your career if you don't have your health. And you know, the Dalai Lama once said that man can have 1,000 dreams until he doesn't have his health. And then he has but one. So again, society often teaches us to ignore our health until we get sick, and then we go to the doctor and the doctor will give us a pill and they'll fix us. However, I don't believe in that process. It's not working because we have so much chronic illness in the world today. Let's not wait to get sick. Let's be proactive in looking after our health such that we never get that diagnosis, and so that we can live and have a long health span. We don't end up in nursing homes for 10 years like the average North American today. And we can have the energy and the mental acuity to be able to run our businesses successfully. So that is my introduction for you on the Toxic Load quiz. So now I want to dive into your representational system. And this was also a quiz that I had asked you to do prior to attending this workshop. And if you recall, it looked like this. You had some questions, you filled them out, you put them on the page on the other side, and then you determine your rep system. So there are 4 rep systems here: visual, audio, kinesthetic, and auditory digital. And it's really important to understand this when we're communicating with other people. So first of all, when communicating with other people, only 7% of communication is verbal. 38% is tonality. So using different tones in your voice to keep people entertained, which hopefully I'm doing here, and I'm not talking in a monotone so that I've put you all to sleep and you've all left the workshop. So tonality is really important to keep people engaged. And then that's 38% of communication. And then the other 55% is physiology. How are you standing, sitting? Are your arms crossed across your chest, and is your face all crunched up and scrunched up and not looking happy? Or are you open? Are you excited? So then from there, that 7% of communication, we break down into how different people use different words based on their rep system, so that you can be aware of this and now start using the words of all the rep systems in order to make sure that you are being heard by your audience. I need a sip. So Have you all done this quiz? Oh my God, you guys are amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you for doing all of this in advance. It just allows us to move through here more quickly. So if you can put in the chat, are you visual? Are you auditory? Are you kinesthetic? Or are you auditory digital? Let's put that in and see where we're at. And while you're doing that, I'm going to let you know that in society, 40% of the population is visual, 40% of the population is kinesthetic, 20% of the population is auditory, and of that 20% of them are actually auditory digital. So that's the smallest grouping. Now, if you're an auditory person and you use language that only relates to auditory people, you're only reaching 20% of the population whenever you speak. So understanding this is great because now you can start to incorporate language of the kinesthetics and of the visuals and of the auditory digital, and then you can reach 100% of the people. So I will include for you afterwards in a follow-up email for those of you that are here. And for those that are catching the recording, I will have this document available for you. And it is a document that lists the visual, auditory, kinesthetic words that people use to give you an example. And I will also pull that up on the screen here for you. Give me just 1 second so that you can see it. Okay, sharing my screen with you. Here we go. Okay, so here are the list of predicates. So visual people tend to memorize by seeing pictures and are less distracted by noise. They often have trouble remembering and are bored by long verbal instructions because their mind may wander, and they are interested by how the program looks. And by the way, thank you for putting your results in the chat. I can see that we actually have some visual, some auditory, some kinesthetic, and auditory digital. Great. And I myself am auditory digital. So under visual, you can see the types of words these people are using when they talk. And these are the words you want to listen for when you are doing discovery calls and also working with clients. And you can start practicing this tonight at the dinner table, just listening to the conversation around the table to determine or get an idea of what representational system the other people in your family might have. When you're listening for it with clients, it's a clue that, oh, this person is likely visual. I'm going to start using more visual language when I talk to them because they will hear me when I do that. And so it helps you build stronger rapport because they can actually hear what you're saying. So visuals use words like see, look, view, appear, show, dawn, reveal, right? So we can all think of phrases that you might tell somebody something and they say, oh, I see. You know, we hear that all the time, right? The auditory person is typically easily distracted by noise. They can repeat things back to you easily and learn by listening. They like music, they like to talk on the phone, and tone of voice and the words used can be very important. So again, here are their words: hear, listen, sounds, make music, harmonize, etc., etc. I like the one rings a bell. Somebody might say to you, you say, hey, do you remember when? And then they go, oh, that rings a bell. Well, that's a clue that that person is auditory. And remember, that's only 20% of the population. Now with kinesthetics, we are moving into people who feel. And so often they talk slowly and they're breathy. They respond to physical rewards and touching. They memorize by doing or walking through something. They will be interested in a program that feels right or gives them a gut feeling. The words they use are feel, touch, grasp, get a hold of, slip through, etc., etc. So you might say something to someone and they go, oh, I feel like this. If you give them a choice, I feel like this could be their immediate response. And that's a clue they're kinesthetic. And then we have the unspecified group. This is the auditory digital. They spend a fair amount of time talking to themselves. They memorize by steps, procedures, and sequences. They will want to know the program makes sense, and they can also sometimes exhibit characteristics of other rep systems. And so this person is the auditory digital, remember, is 20% of the 20% of auditory, so a very small amount of the population. The kinesthetic and the visual are the 40% of the population. So some of the unspecified words are sense, experience, understand, think, learn, process. You tell somebody something and they say, I understand, could be a clue that they fall into this category. Or instead of saying, I feel like something, they might say, I sense the need to. And that can be how they talk. So at the very beginning of this presentation, when I was asking you those questions, who's ready to feel amazing in your body? Who's ready to hear the conversation with your client? Who's ready to see the ahas? I was using all of these representational language in order to reach out to all of you, so that I didn't lose any of you right at the outset of this conversation. Because when I use those words, it helps you connect with me and it helps you feel heard and understood because I'm connecting with you. And so when you're talking with your client initially, you might want to build in a few of these and print out this page, have it next to you on your desk, build in a few of these words as you're talking with clients, and then start to hear the words they're using to give you the clue, so that will let you know what language you should be speaking in. And you have this quiz that I gave to you, so you're welcome to actually have your clients do the quiz and find out what their representational system is if you would like. On page 2, there is a longer list of predicate phrases here that you can become familiar with, so that you really know what you're listening for in clients, and also ways that you can build in this phrasing in working with them yourself. So under auditory at the very bottom, there's an example here. If I could show you an attractive way in which you could, and you put in your benefit, whatever it is that you're offering them, you would at least want to look at it, wouldn't you? That's a great way, a great phrase to use on your discovery call. Or if this looks good to you, we will go ahead and focus on getting the paperwork in. For the auditory person, if I could tell you a way in which you could, and again, you put in your benefit, you would at least want to hear about it, wouldn't you? So if it was me, for example, if I could tell you in a way which you could reduce your symptoms of aches and pains in your body, you would at least want to hear about it, wouldn't you? And if this sounds good to you, we will go ahead and discuss how to set up an account. And then for the kinesthetic person, if I could help you get a hold of a concrete way in which you could feel amazing in your body and release your symptoms, you would at least want to get a feel for it, wouldn't you? And of course, for you, you would put in the benefit that you offer to your client. And if this feels good to you, we will go ahead and set up an account handling the paperwork. So there's some really great phrasing that you can start using as soon as you know which category your client fits into, in order to increase the conversion rate of your discovery calls. So I hope that is super helpful for you. That is the wealth portion of this workshop, because of course, if you have a higher conversion on your discovery calls, you will have more clients, and as a result, you will be earning more income. It's really that simple. And the language is so critical. So as I said, I highly encourage you to print out that document and of the list of predicates, familiarize yourself with it, have it at your desk, and really start to tune into what are your clients saying, and start speaking to them in their representational system, not yours. So lastly, the next session I want to move into is prosperity. And what I want to go through here with prosperity is making sure that you have the boundaries in place for you to be able to thrive in your life. We have health and we have wealth. But one area where many people fall down is in creating boundaries so that you can be in a position to truly thrive in your life. And when you have those boundaries in place, you're looking after you, you've got your health, you've got your wealth, and you're thriving because you're able to look after you and you have the time to do what you need to do in your life because you've got boundaries set. Now, often setting boundaries can feel icky, right? It might be confrontational. The other person doesn't like it, so then you don't want to do it, or it's just not something that you've ever done before. And believe me, I've been there. And it's probably about 7 years ago now that I had to learn to start setting boundaries. And one of the first things, even before I got to that, was learning to say no. I'm so used to give, volunteering, helping others all the time. It's how I was raised. I saw my own parents do that, and I just thought that was part of adulting. And I didn't ever actually realize that I could put myself first until I got into health coaching school. And I learned that self-care is the most selfless act because it allows you to show up and give the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. And that's a phrase that I made up as a mantra to teach myself to prioritize self-care. Because what I learned there was that it was selfless. And I had previously thought that it was selfish and that I had to look after everybody else first before I looked after me. But then when I learned that it's selfless and it has to be because you can't serve from an empty cup, that just flipped my world on its head, literally. And I started practicing self-care. I started putting my self-care time in my calendar, which was a form of a boundary because once I did that, I committed to that time for me. And I also put in what I was going to do in that time so that I didn't get to that time and go, self-care time, and then start scrolling Facebook. That is not self-care, I promise you. So I would put in what I was going to do. So when I got to that time, I already knew what I was going to do and I could jump in and start doing whatever that was, whether it was going for a walk with a friend, whether it was skiing, whether it was paddleboarding, whether it was doing a workout, whether it was reading a book, whatever it was, something that brings joy to me. And self-care for you is whatever brings joy to you. So I first had to learn to say no. I'm actually going to stop sharing so I can see all of you here for a minute. So I first had to learn to say no. And we as humans tend to use the words yes and no backwards. We're so often saying yes to other people, but every time we say yes to someone else, we're saying no to ourselves. And then we don't say no to other people enough, and therefore we're not saying yes to ourselves enough. So I started learning to say no, and it does take practice. And I remember the first time that I had an opportunity to say no, and I volunteered at the high school a lot when my kids were in high school. And I was asked one day by a friend whose daughter was a year older than mine and graduating. And she said, next year Emma will have graduated. I won't be around to run the school career day. And I was wondering if you would like to take that on and run it next year because your daughter's still at school. And in my head, my first conscious answer is yes, because that's what I've always said, yes. But then I knew that I had to practice starting to say no. And so I said, no, I'm sorry, I can't take that on. And the look on her face was complete shock because, of course, I'd always said yes before. And while I'm looking at the complete shock on her face, in my head, I'm hearing, what are you doing? You know that you could do this with both hands tied behind your back. Why are you saying no? Just say yes. And so then I had to consciously choose to override that unconscious thought with another thought of, no, I'm practicing saying no. It feels really uncomfortable right now. However, I'm practicing saying no. And so I went away and I said no. And guess what? Career Day happened, and it allowed other people who don't normally volunteer to step up and take that on. And they got an opportunity versus it being the same old group of people that were volunteering. So it all worked out great. And I learned to say no. And that was the hardest time to say no was that first time, and each time after that, it got easier. So with boundaries, what I'm going to be doing here today is teaching you a really easy and non-confrontational way to set boundaries for yourself in your life so that you have the space to be able to thrive and therefore live in a place of health, wealth, and prosperity. Because to me, the meaning of prosperity is enjoying both wealth and health. And when you get to enjoy that because you've created the boundaries in your life to set that up for yourself, that is true prosperity. So, boundaries. Here's this woman who's, she's got kids coming at her or other people coming at her, and she's sitting inside her Zen bubble because she's created her boundary. So there's 3 steps to setting a boundary. When somebody asks you to do something, your initial reply is neither yes or no. Instead, it's a self-check-in. And then you can reply with conditions. So let me explain that in a little bit more detail. So that first step, you're not going to say yes or no at all. You're going to say, thank you for asking. Let me check my calendar. And you leave it at that. Thank you for asking. Let me check my calendar. Then, later, when you're away from that person or off the phone, you do a self-check-in and you check your calendar. And your self-check-in is asking 3 questions. Do I have the time, the money, or the energy to do this? So in your calendar, do you have the time to do it? Or if it's you're going to use some of your money, or if it's going to use energy, these are our 3 resources, right? Time, money, and energy. Do I have the time, money, or the energy to do this? If the answer to that is no, then your response to the person is no. It's as simple as that. If your answer to that first question is yes, then you ask yourself another question. Do I want to give my time, my money, or my energy and do this? Because just because you have it doesn't mean you have to do it. You only do it if you want to do it. So, do I want to do this? Again, if the answer is no to that question, that's internal check-in, then your response to the person is no when you get back to them. If the answer is yes, that you do want to do it, that's great. However, I recommend that you also, when you respond to the person, that you reply with conditions that will make it work for you. So, for instance, I've got some classic examples here. I've got grandma babysitting a child, right? And so grandma might get asked to babysit children all the time. You might get asked to babysit children all the time. And when you get asked, you can say, let me check my calendar. And then you do your self-check-in. Do I have the time, money, or the energy to babysit? And the answer for this particular example is yes. And then you can say, do I want to? And the answer is yes. I love my grandchildren. I'd love to babysit them. But now you can reply with some conditions. For instance, I'd love to babysit the kids while you go out for dinner. However, could you please have them in their PJs and bathed before I arrive? Or could you have fed them before I arrive? Whatever it is that's going to help make it more easy and more fun for you, because you want to go and you want to play games with the kids, right? You don't necessarily want to be bathing them and kneeling down on the edge of the bathtub on the cold floor and getting all wet, etc. So put those conditions in, or maybe the condition is around the time they come home. Maybe it's, yes, I'd love to babysit the kids, but you know what? I'm leaving really early the following morning to go on a hike with some girlfriends. So I would really appreciate it if you were home by 11 o'clock so that I can get to bed at a decent time. So whatever those conditions are, that's what you're going to give those conditions at the time that you say yes. And again, conditions may not be applicable in every single case, but you want to think about them and give them at the time that you say yes, rather than saying yes and then later trying to give conditions. You want to give conditions at the time of the yes. If your response is no, I want you to remember this key thing, that no is a complete sentence. I'm going to say it again because it's so important. No is a complete sentence. You do not need to justify your reasoning for saying no to the other person. You can simply get back to them and say, thank you for asking me, but my answer is no. That's it. That's it. So another example on this page here, you can see the teenager with the car keys. This is something that I had to learn to set boundaries around. And so again, in this case, when the teenager comes and asks you, Mom, may I borrow the car? You don't have to answer in that instant. You can say, let me check my calendar. Let me think about what I'm doing for the rest of today. Do I need my car? Whatever you want to say there, and just give yourself a moment to think about it while you do your self check-in. So your response could be, let me think about it. Can I get back to you in 5 minutes? Or 10 minutes, or however long it's going to take you to do your self check-in and decide. And you do your self check-in. And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. And remember, it's a complete sentence, and your teenager isn't going to be happy, but it's not their car. It's your car, and you get to set the boundaries. Now, if you decide to say yes, then you can say yes, but reply with conditions. The gas tank has to be full when the car comes home. There shouldn't be any garbage or cups or whatever from your friends in the car when the car comes home. Whatever those conditions are. For me, it was all about the garbage and the cups because I like my car to be really neat and tidy, and I don't like straw wrappers and plastic cups, in the back seat. So my kids knew that if they borrowed the car and they had friends in the car, that they needed to do a little sweep of the car before they returned the car to me, or before I drove in the car, that it had to be clean and there couldn't be any cups in it. And that's also where you can set consequences. That if, the first time you give the conditions and they don't meet those conditions, then the next time around they ask to borrow the car, now you're going to set consequences. Yes, you can borrow the car, and these are the conditions, and last time you didn't honor that. Therefore, this time, there's a consequence. And that will be that if the car isn't clean when I get it back, that you don't get to use the car for the next week, month, however long you want to make that consequence. Now, when you're setting boundaries with other adults and you have a need to set a consequence, it may be an adult daughter or son who didn't come home by 11 p.m. like you asked, and you didn't get to bed till 1 a.m. because they were out having so much fun, and then you only got 5 hours of sleep before your big hike. So the next time around, you're going to set a consequence with them. But with adults, we ask them to set their own consequence. For children, we set it for them. But for adults, we ask them to set the consequence and say, last time you came home late. So if you'd like me to babysit again, there has to be a consequence. I need you to be home by this time. And if you're not home by this time, please tell me what that consequence is and let them come up with it. Because generally it's worse than what you would come up with yourself anyway. But because they're in partnership with that consequence, they're much more likely to follow through and meet your conditions. So just to recap on this, 3 steps to boundary setting. The first important step is that you do not say yes or no in the moment. You give yourself some room to think and do your self check-in. So you are going to say, let me check my calendar, let me think about it, let me get back to you. And then you do your self check-in. Do I have the time, money, or energy to do this? And then, do I want to give my time, money, or energy to do this? And if the answer is yes, you can apply with conditions and a consequence if necessary. If the answer is no, then you simply say no. And no is what? That's right. No is a complete sentence. So I hope that you have found this workshop to be very helpful with some powerful tools and action steps that you can take to move forward in your daily life and being able to use these steps. I just want to go through a couple of last things here with you as we wrap up. Let me share my screen again here. So I just want to talk about the requirements for change in our life. for lasting change, we do need to get rid of our limiting beliefs and negative emotions, those toxicities that I talked about in the very beginning of this workshop. And as I mentioned, timeline therapy is a very, very powerful and very fast technique for helping to do this. And then you want to also be taking action, including enforcing boundaries and sourcing. And what I mean by sourcing is self-care, making sure that you are looking after you and sourcing yourself, filling your cup. And focus on what you want, because these thoughts do become suggestions for your unconscious mind. Think of your unconscious mind as always listening in. And what you think about, you can make happen. So when you focus on what you want, you make that happen. Too often we end up focusing on the negative and focusing on what we don't want. And guess what we get more of? We get more of what we don't want. And then we wonder why we're stuck in this place of don't want, because we're focusing on the negative, which is why getting rid of the negative at the beginning and then choosing to focus on what we want allows us to achieve what we want. So these are very key steps to creating change in your life and helping to up-level you. So what happens is we have our beliefs that lead to our thoughts. And remember, our beliefs are part of our filters that are, all of our experiences are being filtered through. So our beliefs come from our very young childhood age. And they impact our thoughts, they impact our language, that impacts our actions, and that impacts our results. So when it comes to our beliefs, are your beliefs outdated? Are they serving you? Because if not, again, we can change your beliefs. We can upgrade them to new beliefs to help support you in the person you are becoming. And so yes, your beliefs lead to your thoughts, which lead to your language. And again, we talked about language, the type of language you're using. Are you using visual language, auditory language, kinesthetic language? Are you relating to your clients? That language that you're using is impacting your actions, their actions. Are they going to say yes to you because they understand you, they like you, they hear you? And those actions then lead to results. So what are the next steps? Well, this is a very short introduction to some of the powerful tools of neuro-linguistic programming, and I've talked about timeline therapy and hypnotherapy. And if you'd like to learn more, and perhaps you're a practitioner or a coach yourself, if you'd like to learn these tools to work with your clients, these tools of the unconscious mind are not taught in our education system, but they are so powerful, and they're accessing the other 90%, and they make your work as a coach so much easier. You're getting profound results for your clients, and they rave about you. And at the same time, as you get designated in these different modalities, you can also be earning CEUs towards other designations that you have, where I know that you have to get CEUs every single year. So I have an 8-day mind body practitioner training, and here is the link that you can check that out, and come join us and have fun, because these are such powerful tools that you can use in your work, or learn them just to use in your everyday life in order to be able to catch yourself when you are going into the negative and flip it to the positive. Have the tools to be able to do that, to be able to blow out whatever it is that you're feeling in your body right now that is causing you to hold you back, and blow that out and bring in your superhero cheerleader so that you can keep moving forward in the direction you want to go in your life. So these tools can be used as a business tool or in your personal life as you grow and become a better person and become the person you were always meant to be. So thank you very, very much for being here. As I'm sure you can tell, I love all of this work. There's so much more I could dive into, but I really do want to honor your time. And I'm going to stop the recording here for those who haven't been able to attend, so that they can capture it. and we will dive into some Q&A for the group that is here. Thank you very much for attending, and feel free to reach out to me at melissa@yourguidedhealthjourney.com if you have any questions or would like to set up a complimentary discovery call with me to talk about any of this further.